I never had any romantic views about the European Union, and I see it as economic imperial force. At some point of time, they even dreamt of being a global actor, strategically important and all that. Now they are struggling to get out of their irrelevance, and because of that, they are dangerous because they're doing irrational things.
Hello, everybody. This is Pascal from Neutrality Studies, and today I'm talking to Dr. Biljana Vankovska, who's a full professor of international relations and peace studies at St. Cyril and Methodius University in Skopje, the capital of Macedonia. Biljana has been serving on various academic journals such as Security Dialogues and Journal of Balkan and Near East Studies, and she's one of her region's most prominent voices in international relations, talking and writing about peace and reconciliation for decades. Also, let me mention that Biljana is a friend of Jeffrey Sachs, who kindly connected the two of us. Biljana, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Pascal, and thanks, Jeff, for getting us in contact. I'm a great fan of your podcast, so I gladly accepted the invitation. And I have to mention something else. I usually recommend my students to follow the podcast because through the dialogues you have with your excellent guests, they can learn much more about this changing world firsthand through analysis and testimonies of your guests. So it is much better to learn about the international relations today this way than learning from a book. Nothing can be learned from a book today.
Thank you very much. You know, it's quite funny because we are almost back to Socrates, right? Socrates refused to write because he said philosophy happens in discussion. And then, of course, what we have left about him is the books that Plato wrote about him. So.
Yes, there are good sides of that and bad sides. Yes, you are right.
But let's move to our international relations discussion, because I burn to know how Macedonia, North Macedonia, looks at international relations. What the general opinions of people around you are, because of course your country has a very, very complicated history, even just the last 30 years, having been part of Yugoslavia and then having been the last republic that kind of stuck it out together with Serbia in the early days of the 2000s, and then becoming independent, and then even changing your name for the sake of joining NATO, something that Serbia would never even dream about. Can you give us maybe an overview of how what is going on in Macedonia right now, especially looking at Russia and Ukraine, and how do you interpret the development of Macedonia in international relations?
To correct you, at the beginning, Macedonia got independence in 1991, rather soon after the breaking up of the conflicts in Slovenia and Croatia. So in September that year, Macedonia declared independence.
Sorry, I confused it with Montenegro. Sorry. Yeah, Macedonia.
No problem. The whole region is so complex that I know that it is hard to explain. Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, Montenegro, Macedonia, then Kosovo, of course, is a special case. So, yes, I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about a very tiny country in the south of what used to be Yugoslavia. And this was a unique case at the time because even the so-called international community called us oasis of peace, because we were the only former Yugoslav republic to separate from the rest by peaceful means. So not bloodshed, no casualties, no destruction whatsoever. But of course, each of these separate parts of once Yugoslavia had their internal problems. And for the first time ever, we had to deal with them without Belgrade, the central government, to really practice independence. It was easy to draft a constitution, copy-paste from some Western models, but we all know as social scientists that it takes time to make institutions work, to really find what works in your environment and what doesn't work, because you cannot just parachute democracy somewhere and expect good results. So Macedonia had problems of its own, but the biggest one, to the surprise of many, was the name of the country. And I'm really tired talking about the name of my country, you know, the struggle. First of all, on the first step, to get accepted in the United Nations, we faced the first problem because Greece, as a part of then European community, had much higher leverage power to interfere in these power corridors, and to say that small Macedonia, that had no army, that was totally disarmed by the Yugoslav army that retreated that way in order to fight elsewhere. That then Macedonia was a security threat for Greece and for the Europe. And under that pressure, Macedonia was enforced to accept some kind of temporary name or provisional name of former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. So for many decades, we had to negotiate with our southern neighbor Greece over the name, and to try to preserve our own identity, because, you know, we don't have any reserved name or way to identify ourselves. And the decision of the UN Security Council was against the UN Charter, because they imposed one condition more for accepting the membership of this new country. But the weak must do what they have. So that was a very dramatic time, but it is interesting that I'm not going to all this long history, and I say I'm very frustrated even talking about a silly thing like a name of a nation, of a country. What for? It is really something that goes out of anything we know about serious issues in international relations. But the then leadership of the Macedonian state managed to gain recognition of the constitutional name, the Republic of Macedonia, by 135 states. So we had even the members of the UN Security Council, the top 5, that accepted that constitutional name. But still, that was a problem, how to integrate the country into NATO and European Union. Why was that important? Because the narrative that we accepted, like anybody else in Eastern Europe, in Southeastern Europe, that there is no other alternative, TINA principle. So the narrative went, we first have to join NATO first, which is a nonsense, of course. Anybody knows that one can become an EU member, not necessarily NATO, like Ireland, or not to mention other cases. But still, here in this region, the Western powers projected this idea that you have to first join a military alliance, and that would ease your path to Brussels, the other Brussels, meaning European Union. And of course, the majority of the population would rather take European Union as, this ideal picture of welfare, community of democracies, of progress, of human rights, and well-being and social well-being, because we were coming from a socialist country. And the transition meant total destruction of the social structures, of the societal ties, and even the contacts with the rest of Yugoslavia. So Macedonia used to be one of the poorest parts of former Yugoslavia and now had to survive all alone as an independent state. So there was this dream, this myth that once we are there in the European Union, everything will be perfect. They're going to take care of us. They're going to adopt us as small neighbors, poor neighbors. And, the story goes like that. What I have always found very ridiculous and absurd is that we were talking about a region that just suffered horrific internal and external conflicts. Bosnia, Croatia, Kosovo, and all this mess. So why would post-conflict societies want to join a military alliance, rearm themselves, train their militaries, instead of investing into building bridges, healing the wounds, having some economic impetus in development, and transitional justice, reconciliation, and all that. But the leadership in almost all countries in the region was on the same line. So Macedonia was following that until I would say Washington got really annoyed. It was now I'm going to connect the cases of Ukraine and Macedonia, and you could wonder what is common between these two countries that are not even close to each other in geographic terms and in political terms. They were part of a former socialist federation of USSR. We were part of another socialist federation, both on a front line or this line frontier where great powers mixed or got conflicting interests. But we all know the Euromaidan, the colored revolution in Ukraine. Very few people know that that same year, later in the fall of 2014, there was first a student protest, mass student protest in Macedonia. I was part of it. I supported it as a professor. We even formed something called Student and Professors Plenums, which now I'm making a footnote here, reminds on what's going on right now in Serbia. The Serbian protests, students are protesting for months nowadays, and the professors joined them with legitimate reasons. I don't doubt that. That was the case here. That is the case in Serbia as well. So we had some legitimate problems in our country, and we didn't have another way to express the frustration and the need for a new government, for a new way of dealing with the things, but going on the streets. Much later, not much later, but sometimes later, I personally, as someone who was a participant in a part of these events, and I naively believed we were fighting for the autonomy of our university because the government wanted to make some reform and to put us under state control. But later on, this student protest transformed into a political protest. The then opposition took over, actually, the leading part in this social movement. And that was transformed quickly into a colored revolution. In Macedonia, it was called a colorful revolution. Why? Because the first association about Macedonia, many would recall that they find in menus under salad, Macedonian salad, meaning this fruit salad made with different ingredients. the message is the Macedonian society is not homogeneous. It is made of different ethnic, religious, and linguistic groups. So the salad describes the country the best. So that was one message sent. This society that is so colorful have stood up against the ruling elite and want something better. But what was behind that was something that took place in 2008, actually, the NATO summit of 2008 in Bucharest. And now we all think about the proposals to offer membership idea or plan for Georgia in Ukraine. Here in Macedonia, we were focused on our membership because the then President Bush Jr. announced a day ahead. Tomorrow, we are going to welcome 3 new states in our alliance, Albania, Croatia, and Macedonia. The next morning, there was a veto, of course, behind the closed doors. And the formal announcement was Macedonia is not welcome as long as the name issue is open. So they should go back to resolve this problem, and then they can get back.
And just a footnote for anyone who hasn't heard about the problem. The problem is that Greece has a region that is also called Macedonia, and the Greeks constantly opposed the naming of Macedonia as a country, and they were the ones who said, like, oh, this is just a confusion with our region. And then there was a dispute on whether or not your Macedonia had like any claims on Southern Macedonia, and blah 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 blah. But that's just why Greece always opposed.
It has some other elements. I'm not going deeper into that because there is really ethnic Macedonian minority in Greece living in that northern part, which is not recognized by Greek state, but that is not the only minority that is not recognized because there are Turks, Roma people. So Greece has this different political attitude toward the minorities. Yeah. So then we have this unhealed wound from the civil war in Greece in 1948, when the ethnic Macedonian partisans were fighting together with the Greek communists. That was the end of the Second World War. And on the eve of the beginning of the Cold War. So here on this border, the Macedonian, actually Yugoslav border, and the Greece border, there was a region that was still fighting for the communist side. So, of course, with British help of napalm bombs and destroying whole cities. And that provoked a mass exodus of civilian population, not only Macedonians, but also Greeks who were communists. So all these people had to leave. So there are layers of history that burdens the relationship between the two countries.
Let's go back to the colorful revolution, because I think we're not done with the story.
Revolution, right? Yes. Here we have these scenes from Kiev, from Victoria Nuland, F the EU, and let's give people sandwiches and all that. And there were casualties, as we know. In Macedonia, it was done in a more subtle way. Victoria Nuland didn't need to offer sandwiches, but the US agencies that we know nowadays, how they spent a lot of money all around the world for regime change, they did so in Macedonia too. So they empowered the opposition. They transferred this energy from the student protests into a political direction. And all that actually provoked dismay and dramatic situation. If you ask why was necessary to remove that old government, I could give you a million good reasons why that government was not democratic or it was enough of them. But still, from this perspective, from geopolitical perspective, Nikola Gruevski was the prime minister of that time. He was the first one to open Macedonian foreign policy toward Russia. South Stream project was supposed to go through Macedonian territory and provide us with cheap Russian gas. Then he offered a hand for cooperation with China, with India, with Emirates. You know, he did not follow exactly the Brussels instructions. And he was very stubborn over the name issue. He would not make any here exception and change the name. So he had to be removed. So in Ukraine, we know how it ended up after Euromaidan, and in Macedonia, there was a change of government. But you know, the interesting thing is that despite all these upheaval, social movements, walking on the streets, and various performances, and everything I see in Ukraine, in other parts of the world, in Georgia or in Serbia, is a déjà vu for me. I have seen it. I've lived with that. So I know exactly the same. It is the same textbook, how things go on. And one could even predict how it would end. But here we had this preparation for early elections. The government and the prime minister accepted. Okay, they had no other choice because the European mediators, the US embassy, the US ambassador was sitting in the government's hall to make the pressure. So they organized the elections in December 2016, after 2 years of all these dramatic events. And the then ruling party of Nikola Gruevski won the elections. Actually, still the majority of the population was for that political option. But he didn't have enough seats, of course, to make a government of his own. Macedonia is ethnically divided society, very sensitive issue, the relations between the majority of Macedonians and the biggest minority of Albanians.
And a parliamentary democracy, so the need to form coalitions if you don't have a
not only majority. Parliamentary democracy in normal terms of the concept, but we have consocial democracy, power sharing democracy. That model was imposed again by the West after the short-lived military conflict in 2001. There was 6 months of really military violence between the Albanian UÇK, a part of the Kosovo branch that fought in Macedonia, made of mostly Macedonian Albanians, but also joined by their brethren from the neighborhood. And Mr. Solana was the main mediator of the time. Robertson was the general secretary of NATO. So they were all involved in 2001 to make a ceasefire and actually to impose a peace deal. They did so. And ever since, the political system that was imagined as parliamentary democracy, as you said, turned into a hybrid form of consocial plus parliamentary democracy. So you have to bring together in the government one Albanian party and one Macedonian party, and they make a coalition. Not by the constitution. That is the interesting part. There is nothing in the constitution about how the government is formed. But it is taken for granted like a political pragmatic solution to provide peace and to satisfy the big parts of the society. So whoever is the winner on the elections have to make a coalition with the winner from the other ethnic group. So in short, I could say that Macedonia has become a binational state from that moment on, because each side has a veto power and can block moving on in any direction.
I mean, that's can be a good thing, can be a bad thing. It's a little bit alike to how how Belgium works, because of the two groups basically can deadlock each other.
Yes. Of course, we have other ethnic groups, as I mentioned, but they are too small to have a political weight and influence the developments. But getting back to 2016, the winner of the election was unable to form a coalition government because the American embassy said, no, you cannot go back to your old coalition partner. So you have to choose the loser from the Macedonian side. That was the then opposition. The then opposition had made a leader, a hero of that movement in the face of Social Democrat Party. Zoran Zaev was the leader, a rich man, oligarchs from a provincial part of Macedonia, who was a mayor for many years, and he was running the major opposition party. So they had a person. They empowered him. He made there was an aura of heroic battle and struggle against this authoritarian leader who has to go and all that. You can grasp my idea. Ever since actually things moved into more speedy path toward NATO, joining NATO, because Brussels and Washington were annoyed to have this open question made by a small, unimportant country, completely unimportant, a very small territory, less than 2 million people, and they are stubborn and they're not giving their name. We need them in NATO, not because they can contribute to the collective security of NATO, to the contrary, because they're poor, they have nothing to offer, but the puzzle will be closed. The mosaic of the Balkans will be all NATO. And then, of course, you have only Serbia that is a special case because of the NATO bombardment in 1999 and their military neutrality. And they would not push Serbia to join NATO, but European Union is an option for our northern neighbor. So that's why we started with this frustration, because the name was changed for the sake of a military alliance in false belief and pretext that it speeds the way to European Union. And then just 6-7 years later, we find ourselves in a very strange situation. Then we are not sure that NATO exists anymore. Still, we are enforced to buy American weapons. This is this morning's news that when I was checking what's new on the headlines, there was an interview of Minister of Defense for Voice of America, and he was proudly saying that we are purchasing new drones and I don't know what equipment. So we have to deal with this transactionalist president in Washington. And since we have nothing to offer, we have no rare minerals, we have no Riviera, we have nothing to offer except to buy weapons from our poverty, from our impoverished society. In this dramatic moment for the West, this division of the West between United States and what is rest of Europe, I don't know even how to call it, because they meet in different constellations. one set of people sits in Paris, then another set of people sit in London, then they go back to Brussels. So nobody really knows where NATO begins and ends and who makes decision. And European Union comes with this horrifying ideas of rearming. So you can imagine how it looks for a country that is somewhere on a periphery, still hoping to join European Union. But on the other hand, the new government, we had elections last year, decided to take the side of Donald Trump, even before the elections in the States. So now we are aligned with Hungary, with Slovakia, with these countries that until yesterday they were saying, yes, we support Slava Ukraini, we send military weapons, whatever we have, and political support and all that. All of a sudden, we are in a different camp. So there is a confusion. There is total confusion in terms of what's next. What is our foreign policy? Are we going with United States against Europe, or now we are the peacemakers together with Donald Trump, or we follow this European integration path? It is very hard to say how this will end, because I'm not very trustful in Donald Trump, to be honest, and I don't see him as a peacemaker. But this is how it looks from a position of this country that invested so much in order to join military alliance against its own national interests. And now we are buying American drones and equipment in order to please the master in Washington.
But this is one of the things that I have such a hard time to understand. How is it that countries especially in the Balkans, who, I mean, okay, Macedonia didn't have to fight, but others had to fight for their freedom from a union, right? And they're so eager to get into another one. I understand the European Union, because the European Union at its core used to be an economic arrangement in order to benefit for mutual benefit. And even that one has its big problems, especially if you look at how the southern neighbor of yours, Greece, was treated when it defaulted. I mean, it was treated worse than Germany after the Second World War. I mean, absolutely horrific. But okay, let's leave that one aside. At least in theory, there would be, there's this whole market and so on. But a military alliance, especially if you're only surrounded more or less by that military alliance, I mean, Albania not, but then Albania, I mean, you joined at the same time.
Albania joined, and in Kosovo, there was the biggest military base in Europe, Bonstil, made just after the NATO bombardment. So we were surrounded by NATO member states. They argued, we are peaceful actors. Okay, fine. Why didn't we take neutrality status? I'm wondering. That is my idea.
Yeah, I mean, my idea too, obviously. But the thing is that there is this very weird argument, and I just need to give you this one about Switzerland, because right now, these days in Switzerland, people make the argument that we need to increase our defense spending, not just from 2 billion a year to 4, which this is in discussion or semi-decided, but it needs to go to 100 million. because 100 billion, because the threat is so huge, and Switzerland could never defend itself. And we need cooperation with NATO, because alone we could never defend ourselves. And then I ask myself, doesn't that mean that you're judging that NATO is only able to defend Switzerland? Switzerland is part of it, but you're completely surrounded by NATO. What is that mind virus that is eating up people's brains, that they don't realize that arguments like these make no sense? I mean, Macedonia in this sense too is only surrounded by friendly countries, even within NATO, right? So what happened in Macedonia that pushed it? I mean, okay, the political process pushed that, you just said, but there's also a convincing going on of the population, isn't there?
You and I talk on a ground of common sense, rationale behind the political moves, but I don't know about the Switzerland, you know better. I can tell you about my part of the world where there is empty shell. The state is not a state. It has no capacity to really make its own decisions. So throughout these 3 decades of transition, so-called transition, we don't know to where, a Croatian philosopher, Boris Budin, says transition to nowhere, because we are really in the middle of nowhere. There was a process of so-called international state building. These state builders were coming here to impose their medicines, from economics to political institutional arrangements as power sharing, as I told you, which makes now more harm than good. Maybe it was a good solution in a post-conflict period for some time. But now, 20 plus years later, obviously it doesn't produce democratic outcomes. We have a high level of corruption, mutual bargaining, and behind the closed door corruption and all that between the ethnic elites of the 2 components of the states. So it is definitely not a good solution. Going back to NATO and all this geo-strategic goal, it is some sort of inertia. We have seen that all Eastern European countries were going down that way: Poland, Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary, and so on. So there is no other option. Tina, there is no other alternative. So probably that is the best. And then the state builders say, yes, you just go on, listen to us, everything will be fine. And then you lose the critical mass. You have no dissenting voices. You have no debate. Even nowadays, when all these things are happening, I'm probably the only one who is, like in an echo chamber talking to myself. What about the situation between Washington and Europeans? What's going on in NATO? Some French media talk about post-NATO world. European Union is not a peace project. It is economic, but in terms of military industrial complex. It is a completely different economic project nowadays, because they say we are going to take money from the social services and needs from the citizens in order to protect ourselves from the bad Russians. So there is a total madness, and I am the only one who is asking myself loudly, writing on social media, on Substack, on everywhere I can. So do we have capacity to sit down as a strategic community, as experts, as academia, as politicians, all together to reconsider where is our position, what is best for us? Because obviously, Trump said that in his first mandate, if you remember, when he said, I'm not so crazy, I'm paraphrasing, of course, I'm not so silly to start a third world war for a small country like Montenegro. Montenegro is even smaller than Macedonia. Nowadays, we see how he behaves in terms of his priorities. He wants to cut off this Ukraine stuff that is actually a military defeat for the West and for NATO and for United States that incited the problem in the first place. But then he has other plans. And he insists on European partners to give more money for weapons, to go up to 5% of GDP.
Yeah, because it's utterly clear. If he says you need to spend 5% of GDP on your defense, then what he means is you have to buy US weapons for that kind of money, and this is huge. It's huge. It's lunatic because. And I think you are also, you know Jan Oberg, of course, right?
Yes,
and
yes.
I mean, having a nominal spending a target for security absent of any kind of threat analysis, individual threat analysis for the individual countries is the height of lunacy. But this is basically just saying, like, send more money over, just in the same way as all of this money that Ukraine then, I mean, the weapons that Ukraine used is all money that went straight back into the U.S. economy, right? Even the money that the U.S. paid for went straight into the U.S. economy.
It is just turning the way, going back to the military-industrial complex.
And the Europeans, they just can't understand that. Apparently, they are at the moment completely on board with this kind of rhetoric, thinking that throwing money at the problem will make the problem go away without even defining what the problem is. Because the Russians never ever said that they want anything else but a security structure for Europe. They never said anything else.
I think that the best way to explain this duplicity, this nonsensical thinking is Orwell. It is double speak, double thought. You know, you combine two conflicting ideas and believe in that all at once. I mean, they exclude each other because if you invest in more military security, you necessarily diminish your social, human security, your political stability, because at the end of the day, each of these European countries is going to pay the bill at home. Yeah. And I'm sure this is not going forever. They went into Trump's trap, and they are happy and even showing muscles. We are now going to show these Russians. I mean, for God's sake, Ukraine until yesterday had all possible Western support, military support, GPS, satellites, intelligence, and armaments and everything. And they are, of course, not able to win the war. That is unwinnable in this constellation. So then it is normal to ask other countries, to ask these countries to ask themselves, so where are we now? Are we going to invest more into military security? And the funny thing is that we exchange the name, the history, the identity, and all this for NATO. And the argument was, from now on, we will be safeguarded by NATO. We will be saved under the umbrella. Nowadays, they're talking about nuclear umbrella. I mean, that is really crazy. I mean, I don't know what better word to find to describe this. But here you have this lack of really serious social potential to open painful issues. And whenever somebody like me opens the question, oh, it is pro-Putin or pro-authoritarian mind or whatever. You talk about peace and neutrality. My idea was neutrality. From the first moment on, we do not need a military alliance, because who is going, if they decided, for example, we have an open dispute with Bulgaria now. The Greece is resolved, let's say. But now the Bulgarians want a change of the Macedonian constitution to become a constituent nation as a part of our constitution due to some understanding of history in their minds, and they consider Macedonians to be Bulgarians, but we are not aware of that, so they should teach us that we are actually Bulgarians. I'm not going there. It is a very funny story, but a story that slightly reminds on a treatment of Ukrainians by Russians to some degree. You know, they used to be part of our state and then they went along and okay, never mind. So if in situation like this, when a NATO member state, United States, has a clear territorial ambitions over Greenland, over part of another sovereign state, a NATO member state, Denmark, I'm wondering who is going to prevent Bulgarian troops to come with tanks in Skopje. 200 kilometers. They can arrive any day in the capital of Skopje. I mean, there is no, we were talking about this rules-based order. Now we have no rules at all. So
you know, this is the way the League of Nations collapsed in the end, when one League of Nations states attacked another one and the League didn't do anything, nothing. And the League of Nations, just to make this clear, was a stronger military alliance than NATO. NATO Article 5 says other states can support with weapons and military means.
Not necessarily, but can, yeah.
The League of Nations article said must contribute military means to the decision-making body, and it collapsed there. So are we just repeating on a smaller, like transatlantic level, an exercise that we've already tried out?
I think it was Hegel who said that from history we can learn only that we don't learn from history. So it seems that we are somehow doomed to repeat the same mistakes. And when you mentioned the League of Nations and, you know, this inter-war period, whenever I hear the name of Kellogg, this new official of Trump's administration, I remember of Brian Kellogg's pact. And I wonder, and even search on Google if there is some family relation, but I couldn't find any. So there were at least some attempts to prevent the war. Of course, they failed. Nowadays, we don't see even attempts to really sit down and to rethink the European security structure in a way that would provide for a stable, sustainable communication that would not be based on military might, but on diplomacy. We don't talk about diplomacy anymore. We don't have diplomacy anymore. And what is Trump doing is hardly can be called diplomacy, except head of state to head of state, this high-level talks. So we don't know much about that, what's going on, but I don't see a plan there. So it's really very, very worrisome. I'm talking, of course, on from this perspective where I am, and I'm concerned about my country, the region that suffered so much after the fall of Yugoslavia. And I am really frustrated when people talk about quick peace in Ukraine. You cannot get quick peace after such a war. 3 years, over 1 million deaths, hatred, animosity, destruction, trauma. reconstruction of the country. So it will take ages. But first, things first, the hostilities should stop. That is my naive maybe thinking, but there is no other way to stop this madness. Otherwise, we are going to really this new round of preparing a third world war. And when I talk to some of my friends, I'm part of a No Cold War collective led by Vijay Prashad and then some other excellent people from all around the world. So every Monday we have our meetings and discussions on the developments and all that. So we put the focus of whether Trump's approachment to Russia is because he has in mind China and, this reverse Kissinger moment and all that. But then I tell them that I'm much more afraid of what's going on in Europe by the European leaders, by Ursula von der Leyen, and everybody else who just claps, yes, we are going to do that. Because, yes, history teaches us the two world wars were started in Europe by the European forces, by their, ambitions or lack of ambitions. But if we talk about the First World War, like sleepwalking into the war, now they are rushing into the war. I just can't explain that.
It's wake walking. It's like you
exactly.
Nobody in the future will ever be able to hide behind, oh no, we didn't see it coming. It couldn't be bigger. It couldn't be larger, you crazy people. And I'm losing my patience just because it's getting more and more dangerous. And we are now at the point where the Germans again talk about, oh, we need strong leadership, strong military leadership in order to confront this. Yeah, we remember the last leader you had. We really do. I kid you not, I'm so frustrated because like 2 days ago, there was this article in one of the Swiss newspapers where a German dude really said like we need, and he used the German word Führung, like we need a strong leadership. And that word, whenever that comes back, we should all be worried. And it's on the way back. It's now able again. It's possible again to speak about that. And it's not the AfD, the right-wingers. It is actually the centrists that now talk about strong military leadership.
And then we have this really absurd situation that some far-right parties or leaders are talking more about peace actions or not continuing this disastrous policy. And they are, for example, yesterday we heard about the Georgescu in Romania, who is prevented for running the elections because he was far right and pro-Russian element who was calling for peace. I may, as I'm a leftist, and I, of course, cannot identify myself with his ideological framework. Yeah, worldview. But still, there are some reasonable things. And I'm afraid that we cannot afford the luxury of selecting our company. You and I share the same worldview, so we stick together and we leave other side. No, we need to make a wider front of people who know the first things first, peace, but genuine peace.
Peace and the certain principles that we stick to. If we start to hollow out the principles of, everybody gets to run for elections and everybody gets the same chance. If we start to hollow that out, if we start to hollow out free speech just because we don't like somebody, then it is only a matter of time until it will be used against anybody else. And the people who are smartest at grabbing the power, they will grab it the way a Georgian dude grabbed it in the Soviet Union and killed millions. Let's not forget Stalin was not a Russian; he was a Georgian, and Kaya Kallis is not a German or a French. And so it's just we need to be worried of this dynamic. And I feel, and I think you too, we are in Europe in a very, very dark dynamic, aren't we? Like socially.
I agree. And my main concern is Europe. Actually, I said what I think about Donald Trump, and I have no expectations there. I don't like, and you know, in these 3 years, what bothers me as a human being, as a peace researcher, is that we all tend to see things as on a chessboard, and we try to predict who is going where and who is winning, who is losing, and, you know, step forward or backward. We forgot that we are dealing with human lives. We are talking about really something very, very essential, because without ordinary, so-called ordinary people, with societies impoverished because of the military-industrial complex, impoverished because somebody is ruling through fear-mongering, war-mongering, trying to pacifize them. So please be quiet, or, you know, we have this big enemy. I mean, that is a deja vu of something that already happened in Europe. Yes, and Europe is so self-destructive. I know that I never had any romantic views about the European Union, and I see it as economic imperial force. At some point of time, they even dreamt of being a global actor, strategically important and all that. Now they are struggling to get out of their irrelevance, and because of that, they are dangerous, because they're doing irrational things. And we don't need, in this explosive situation, much you know, to be done in order to explode and to spread all around the world. And I have to say, I was listening these days the long press conference and speech of the Chinese foreign minister, and China looks like from another planet. I mean, the only rational and stable and really actor who has a strategic vision and offers some kind of solution, for me, is China at this moment. Unfortunately, they have their own limitations in terms of not imposing their solutions and worldview around the world, but we have to learn something maybe from these different examples.
I think so too, and also, you know, from the ASEAN countries and from people generally outside the European way of doing things. The question to me is, how do we explain what's happening in Europe to these places, to China and to ASEAN and to the Africans and to the South Americans? Because I think that's the place where we can get inspiration. But we need to explain ourselves, because I don't think the Europeans have it in them, at least at the moment, to perceive other models as better as theirs. We still think we're the best and the number one, and if we can solve it, then nobody can.
That is the European hubris and you know, even these colonial imperial minds, especially Great Britain. Look them. I mean, it is a caricature of empire, but their prime minister believes that he's somebody and he can resolve world problems. So how to explain ourselves? I think that we need, first of all, to get in touch, to communicate, to cherish, to establish some points of contact, to exchange views. That is the first point. My first trip to China was last year, so I visited China twice. And the first time I was like going back in time in my socialist homeland. You know, that thing resonated so well with me, like, oh my gosh, the red star everywhere and all that. And then the care for the common good, for the collective good, for caring for ordinary people, and everything is subtle and clean and nice. I mean, I was amazed. The second time I had another perspectives from Xinjiang. Actually, I was there when the West claims that there is a genocide ongoing, so I could see it by myself, And
while they are dropping all of these bombs on Palestinians, right? And they
and nowadays in Syria, I mean, these scenes that I see there, I mean, it is hard to bear.
I'm sorry, Biljana, we do have to come to an end because we have reached one hour, and this is another topic that I cannot even think about it right now because I saw a couple of these things on Twitter, and it's absolutely the horrible thing. Biljana, people who want to read from you, like your analysis, where should they go?
Well, since recently I started on Substack. So I think that is the best way, everything in English, of course. I was a columnist, a regular columnist in my country for more than 20 years, but recently I was censored because I criticized the pro-American policy of my government, this getting close to Trump, picking a side. And that was not published, and then I just drop out. So now I'm mostly active on Substack, on Facebook. People can look for my academic writings elsewhere, these academic platforms, if they Google my name. So that is it.
That's why it's good that we still have, at least for the moment, open social media. Everybody go and check out Biljana Vankovska on Substack. Biljana, we'll talk again. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Good luck.